Right, hopefully everyone can hear me now. Thanks for joining in to our second presentation in a series of YRP Bitesize. Today we got Vanessa Stanley from Siemens talking about the electrification department and digital subsystems. So I'll hand over straight to Vanessa.
Hello everyone. First of all, thank you very much for coming. I am a second year graduate engineer with Siemens Rail Infrastructure. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with Siemens as a company, we are a German founding company by Werner von Siemens, and we are formed of 10 divisions currently. So we have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. In terms of where I'm based, I'm in mobility, rail infrastructure, electrification, and the team I'm in is in digital substation. So in terms of how I got into engineering, I took the A-level and university route. I first got involved with Siemens when I applied for a 12-month internship, which I did some absolutely incredible work, like creating a digitized safe system of work for rail using a novel software. After I finished university, they actually offered for me to come back as a graduate, which was really, really nice of them. And after doing like loads of placement rotations, I finally found a really nice home within the digital substation team. In terms of just a sort of day in the life and what it's like to be a Siemens graduate engineer, you tend to do different rotations with all the different teams, so you can really explore all the areas of the business and get to know where you want to take your own career, because it's part of the company culture that you can really customize your career for how you want it to be. And it's such a good foundation for your future. We also have a really good focus on STEM volunteering as a company. So we've done like loads of talks, which is what the top picture is, with some fellow graduates, as well as a really, really nice training program. We have something for both interns and graduates. So we have the graduate development program, which is where you'll get to know and develop different soft skills and business skills. For example, we have one that's called business influencing skills, which is where you'll learn how to properly run a meeting, how to organize an agenda, how to do an effective elevator pitch. And it's a really, really good opportunity to meet graduates and other ELT from different parts of the country. So you're not just kind of boxed into your own office and you get to travel. There's also dedicated business training weeks. So for example, you can get some technical training, and also there's safety training courses, for example, personal track safety. And then you'll also get software training depending on what area of the business you are. Either colleagues can teach you or there are dedicated sessions for that. So digital substation, what do we do? We essentially provide protection and control solutions for different electrification projects. For example, some of the ones that I've personally been involved with are the East Coast Main Line, especially Phase 2, Midland Main Line electrification, and recently Edinburgh Tram, which is our first DC project. We also have recently begun to do route asset management. So what I mean by this is substations and monitoring their health and really digitizing that substation. And fun fact, we used to be just known as protection and control before we started taking care of route asset management. So as a graduate, where do I fit into this? I support the design and delivery of these solutions for multiple rail projects. For example, the tasks I've completed up to this date are configuring IEDs, or protection relays as they were formerly known, creating addressing documents for VLAN and IP, creating the strategy for accelerated distance protection, and also performing some calculations for distance protection also. So getting into some of the technical stuff now, some of the juice. We have a very, very commonly used IED, which is the MICOM P44T model. it can really detect faults in a quick time, which is why we're able to use it for accelerated distance protection. It can also it also has functions such as thermal detection and monitoring, measuring, and control, which is a lot of fun. So in terms of configurations, you have to use the results of the calculations that you do and you put it into a settings file. You also create and adjust logic functionality with what's called PSL diagrams, and these are then put into the relay, and they will be the functionality and how it works at the heart of it, as well as putting VLANs and IP addresses into an MCL file. And then you can also adjust control and measurements for the relay and really customize it for what each substation needs. We have to also do this in compliance with the IEC 61850 standard, which is an international standard, and that really defines communication protocols for IEDs and substations. So don't get that mixed up with it being a protocol, which is a very, very easy thing to do. We tend to use DMP3 depending. So in terms of distance protection, which I've mentioned, why is it important? Catenaries are obviously very, very open and exposed, so they can be affected a lot by, say, weather, bird strikes, a tree could fall on it, and these faults have to be cleared quickly so that the end customer, which is the people who take the trains daily, aren't disrupted, or we cause minimal disruption. So in terms of how we get this to work so quickly, we have 3 protection zones, and these zones essentially disconnect a certain part of the line, and to make sure that the line is completely and fully protected, we have an overlap in those zones. So for example, zone 1 will have only an 85% reach of the line, and zone 2 will have 120%. So no part of the line is left exposed. The relevant IED will detect the short circuit, and then it will communicate it across the data network to the other IEDs, and then that will ensure the fault is then tripped and cleared in a very, very quick time. That's a very, very quick and dirty way of explaining it. But in terms of this diagram, it essentially just maps out the resistive reach of all of the zones as well. So it's a nice little representation there. So another thing that I've been involved with is VLAN and IP addressing. For those of you who aren't familiar with VLANs, it's a broadcast domain that's partitioned and isolated in the network at the data link layer. And what I mean by the data link layer is in what's called the OSI model, there are 7 possible layers. The first one is physical, which I think involves stuff like the physical structure, coax and fiber. And then the second layer, up 1 layer, is where you'll find like VLAN, so Ethernet, for example. And these VLAN values are essentially mapped out in a document from substation to substation, which shows what IEDs have certain signals and to what substation they can talk to, and what they refer to. And you can also put these in what's called a GOOSE matrix. So GOOSE, it's a very, very funny acronym. It stands for Generic Object-Oriented Substation Event. It's essentially a type of message that can be sent. So if an IED detects that it has a fault in a certain section, then they can send that via a GOOSE message to the other IEDs in that section saying there's a fault. And this is an example of a goose matrix that I've very quickly put together. So on the left-hand side, you'll have the publishing substation, which will be sending out the signals and broadcasting them. And each IED will usually do different things, depending on if it's a track feeder, for example, or an SFC even. And then the VLAN associated with it as well. There will be a description of what the actual message is and what data set it's part of. For example, if it's relaying that there's a fault in this section, it will be part of accelerated distance protection because it's only relevant to that data set. These will then be broadcasted with virtual output, and the subscribing stations will essentially listen for those signals, and they'll pick them up via a virtual input. So for example, as we can see via the fault in this section, which is our top description, it will send a signal out via virtual output 52, and the subscribing substation 1 will pick it up via Bay A virtual output 1. So yeah, that's roughly how Goose Matrix works. They are very, very useful when it comes to configuring IEDs because it shows you how the cross communication between substations or even internally to one substation, how that all works and how it all comes together. I am also a member of the IET, or the Institution of Engineering and Technology. Who we are is we are a professional organisation that looks after engineers and technicians, and we also professionally register them because you'll tend to find that absolutely anyone can just call themselves an engineer. However, these professional organisations such as the IET can get you to chartership or incorporated, for example. And this will then essentially give you the status to say, I am a fully registered engineer according to the UK spec, and I have been approved. It's also our 150th birthday coming up, which is an absolutely incredible celebration. So definitely look out from October onwards to see our events for our upcoming birthday in 2021. So why should you consider the IET as an institution? So we have so many amazing resources available. We have archives in the London building available to members. There's also online resources such as documents and standards, and we even have essentially the equivalent of YouTube, which is called IET TV, and they've got a lot of neat stuff on there as well. There's also an absolutely amazing community. We really do look after each other, and it's like one great big family. They give you so many amazing opportunities. For example, as a YP, I got to attend the volunteer conference in Bangalore in February, which was such an amazing experience. And we really advertise ourselves as a professional home for life, and we will really look after you. So essentially my story with the IET so far, it stems back from university. Because I had a student membership with them due to the academic partnership, that really started me off. And I looked more in depth into the IET, and I ended up joining the Young Professionals Committee for the Coventry and Warwickshire Network. And from there, I became the chair in my final year of university. And what we do is we're essentially, we organise STEM and IET related events for students and young professionals in the Coventry and Warwickshire area. For example, Present Around the World, which is it's a global event actually, and we've hosted the regional ones. So essentially it's our home, which is really nice. and I'm still currently the publicity officer as of today. I've now gained MIET status through Siemens, who've been incredibly supportive of my application so far. And as I said earlier, I attended the Community Volunteer Conference, which was essentially a really nice conference to go over how the future of the IET is going to look, what's happening in 2021 with the 150th birthday, and how the IET as a whole can understand and help YPs out more, and what opportunities we can give to them to really boost their career and also make them feel really at home within the IET. And now I am beginning the journey towards gaining chartership and working to that UK spec and gathering all the evidence for it. And coming up to just my general advice for any ELT, I'm sure some of you will know a lot of this anyway, but in terms of like inside of work, I've always been told, and that's absolutely completely right, that you really should explore all areas of the business, not just so that you have a well-rounded view, but it's so you can also create contacts as well. It's very useful to get to know certain people and teams and what they're all about, especially if you're working in a collaborative project where it's useful to know people in a different team. Definitely challenge yourself as well, and don't just take up the boring tasks because you think you're a graduate and that you shouldn't really have a challenge. I think it's really good for your personal development as well, and definitely ask lots of questions. There's so much that your colleagues can teach you, and they are genuinely such a wealth of knowledge. Taking the initiative has definitely been something I've started to do more of, even in just this 1 year of being a graduate, because there have been points where I've either, like, my workload has become very, very light, and I just kind of think, oh, I should probably, speak to my line manager and ask, what else can I do? Because I don't want to be sitting around doing nothing. Don't be afraid to make mistakes is probably my biggest one to say, because it's very easy to get into the mindset of, I have to get this right first time, I need to impress. And then it kind of almost impedes you from just having a go and taking that challenge on. And actually my line manager said something really, really good to him. He said, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because once you make that first mistake, you'll remember it for a lifetime, and you'll never forget, and you'll know what to do from there, which is a really good piece of advice. And I feel like a lot of people in engineering tend to think about technical skills a little bit too much as well, and they kind of almost put their soft skill development on the back burner. So it's also very important to develop those skills. For example, as I said with our training, like, learn how to create an effective elevator pitch. It's good to develop, how to run an effective meeting with a full agenda, so that everything is productive, because companies are valuing them more and more. It's always really nice to develop those soft skills for yourself. In terms of outside of work, again, a lot of companies like to see you give back to the community that's given you so much opportunity. And a really good way of doing that is becoming a STEM ambassador or joining a group like the YRP. So then you can create events, or you can give presentations or volunteer for, say, the Big Bang Fair. And it's always really, really good to get involved in that wider community and have that outreach, especially if you're a company or your institution. So STEM Learning UK and Green Power Education Trust are very, very good ways of getting involved in that. And I think the most important thing before joining any professional body is that you make sure it's the right one for you. I personally found that the IET was the one that I really wanted to go with, but you don't have to, don't join an institution just because your colleagues are a part of it. Join it because it's the right one for you. There are so many options out there. For example, the IMechE, the IRSE, which is, I believe, the Institution for Railway and Signalling Engineers. So it does pay to have a shop around and really dig deep into what you want. So before any questions, I believe on Tuesday the 8th, we have another bite-sized talk coming from Oliver Craig, and I believe it's about sponsorship. So that sounds really exciting. It's at the same time as well, so from 12:30 to 1. And you can join the YRP for free at youngrollpro.com as well. So you can then keep up with all the activities and definitely sign up for more bite size. Are there any questions?
Thanks for that, Vanessa. A really interesting talk, especially for someone who goes online outside on track a bit. It's interesting that it's just more than just steel masts and steel wires. So it's definitely
there's a lot to it.
Interesting. Yeah. One of the questions we got is the work very similar, or is there variety with the day-to-day of projects?
There can be quite a big variety because sometimes you will have to go on site to make a survey as part of the protection and control side. There's definitely a lot to do in terms of making different forms, doing different calculations, configuring different IEDs. Everything and every site has to be tailored specifically. So there is a good variety in there.
Oh, good stuff, good stuff. What would you think is the sort of the biggest technical challenge you've had to sort of come across so far in your career?
So all of my team are senior engineers. I'm the only ELT and anything below a senior. So I'm having to really rise up to the challenge of even doing some senior level work, but they've always been so supportive of my development, which is amazing of them. And don't be afraid to learn and succeed.
Oh, good stuff. Good question. Probably another one from me, really. But so obviously you came on from doing a placement year onto the graduate scheme. Was there much difference between the two, or was it quite a similar environment?
It was kind of similar in terms of you know everyone already, and you're quite comfortable in that environment anyway. But because you're now technically a tier up, there is a bit more that's expected of you because you're now determining what team you want to go in, what path you want to take in terms of your career, whereas your internship is more about getting your toes wet everywhere and just doing work for all teams.
Oh, yeah, sounds very familiar to my experience at Siemens. I think that's it from all the questions, unless anyone's got any more. But just like to say thank you again, Vanessa, for taking the time out to do this presentation. I'm sure, like the others as me, we'll learn quite a bit more about the world of electrification. Like Vanessa just a little earlier, we got another presentation next Tuesday on sponsorship. So Ollie Craig, our Northeast Chair, is going to be talking about what it's like working in project sponsorship. So, and again, if you're not already part of the YRP, please do sign up. It's free, so there's always a bonus, no money involved. So yeah, hopefully see you again next time for another YRP Bite Size. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.